Good evening, and good Spooktober to you. Happy Halloween, everybody. I just want to say quickly, you're probably wondering where all the Spooktober videos are. Just want to quickly tell you guys that they're going to be late. Couldn't get them all done in time, all 13. Life has been kind of hectic at the moment, but they're coming. They're just going to trickle in through November. But today, I want to do something a little bit unique, a little different, something I've never tried before. I'm actually going to tell you some ghost stories. And as you can tell by the title, it says real ghost stories. And I believe that's a bit of a conundrum, but they're real as far as I can tell. And I say that with confidence because these are ghost stories that have happened to me. These are first-hand accounts. Or of people I know personally, very closely. Either family members or very close friends. And I take these stories very seriously. I have 4 ghost stories in total, 2 of which have happened to me, and 2 that have happened to my brother and a childhood friend of mine. But for this year, I'm only going to be telling you 2, and then next year I'll be telling you the other 2. This is me and my brother being spooked by actual ghosts. Enjoy the tales. When I said tales, I meant the ghost tales. These are ghost stories. The first story I'm going to tell you tonight is called It Smelt of Burnt Hair. This story was told to me by my brother, and remembered by me to the best of my ability. For his privacy, I won't mention my brother's name. I'll just refer to him as my brother only. A little backstory first. My brother and I were children of a divorce. We lived with our mom up until the ages 12 and 14. My brother is 2.5 years older than me, being the eldest. When my brother and I were living with my mom, we moved around quite a lot, mostly being located in the northeast end of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The northeast side of Calgary is notoriously the poorest and roughest part of the city, and our mother was never well off. As I said, we moved around from place to place quite a lot, never really having a proper home that we grew up in. The shortest amount of time we spent in one location was a total of 6 months before we moved on again. The year was 2000, and this location, where our story takes place, was in an area called Falconridge. The elementary school where I was attending at the time was literally right across the road. A short walk across a football field and you'd be standing at the front doors of my school. The house itself was small, but had many levels. A main living room was there to greet you when you entered the front door, as well as a small kitchen. Upstairs was a small bedroom for me, and a master bedroom for our mom. In the basement was a small den, where my brother made his room. I called it a den because there was no door to his room. The room was dressed with shag carpeting, and the entrance to the room itself was only separated from the rest of the basement by a row of beads that were hung vertically from the top of the door's frame. The whole basement had this hippie 70s aesthetic. The only privacy he had was being in the basement itself. To get to the basement, you'd have to open a door, then travel down a C-shaped staircase. The door itself was located in the kitchen. I've noticed one thing with ghost stories that I've heard over the years. Usually when there's a haunting, there's a slow build up to them, little happenings. But with the stories that I'm telling you now, it wasn't a slow build up, but they happened very suddenly. In fact, the only build up that ever happened was there was this smell. Just outside of my brother's room was a water boiler, in the heating unit to the rest of the house. I'm sure he chalked it up to a bad filter, or at the very least an old one, but the smell was something like burnt hair. Again, nothing alarming since an old filter could possibly be causing that smell. But one night, my brother was in his room. Either he was watching TV or playing on his PlayStation, but the hour was late, something close to 3 a.m., and it wasn't like he was doing anything wrong. He was an adolescent, so of course he was staying up late, but our mom was pretty strict about being in bed on time. It was then suddenly that my brother heard someone walking around in the kitchen upstairs. He quickly shut off his TV and threw himself onto his pillow and pulled the covers up to his neck. He half shut his eyes so that he could see through them, but appeared to be like he was sleeping. Thinking it was our mom who was walking around in the kitchen, he expected her to come check in on him. She had probably heard his TV and was about to come downstairs. And like that, the door at the top of the stairs slowly opened. He could even see the light from the kitchen pour down the stairs, lightly illuminating the doorway to his room. He could hear the sound of something slowly walking down the stairs, and then after a moment, behind his half-closed eyes, he saw the silhouette of someone step into frame behind the doorway. It turned and looked right into the room at my brother while he was lying in bed. He could somehow feel that it was staring at him, and that's when he noticed two things. The thing standing in the doorway was much taller than our mom, and the second, there was this overwhelming smell which poured into the room. The smell of burnt hair. He watched in horror behind half-closed eyes as this thing stood there and stared at him, this imposing figure from behind the beads. A long time passed. He didn't know how long, and just as quickly as it had entered the basement, it turned and left, back up the stairs, and closed the door. The next morning my brother told me what had happened, seeming that there was no one else he could tell. It wasn't the sort of thing that he would make up. We subtly asked her mom as well if she was walking around last night, and she said that she wasn't. My brother did sort of believe that there was something supernatural, and I believed him fully. I remember I set out a pen and paper, hoping we could contact the ghost or whatever it was. I'd seen that in a show. You ask it a question, you leave the pen, and it's supposed to answer. But it never replied. We moved out 6 months later regardless, and the figure never returned. Or perhaps it did. This next story is something that happened to me personally, and I call it sleep paralysis. And I don't know if it has any sort of connection to our first story, but it is eerily similar. The year was 2014. I was living with my brother in a small town north of Calgary called Airdrie. He had purchased a little townhouse in a newly built suburb. It was a 2-story home. The second level was the kitchen/living room, and the floor above it were 2 bedrooms, one of which I was staying in. I was going through a lot at the time. I was in the middle of packing for my move to Vancouver. I was picking up my entire life and moving away from my family. But secretly, I was suffering on the inside. A little bit about myself, and I'll admit this is going to get very personal, but it's essential to the story. Since I was 11 years old, I had been diagnosed with clinical depression, and at this time in my life, my mental state was at its absolute lowest. Everyone believed that my move to Vancouver was about a fresh start, but it wasn't. Not initially. This is a bit heavy, but originally when I planned to move to Vancouver, I planned to take my own life. It was something I thought on for a long time. I felt as if I was going nowhere in my life, and I wanted to be away from my family when it happened. I didn't want them to find my body. Needless to say, I wasn't okay, and I was slowly reaching a brink. One night, when my brother was away, I woke in the middle of the night to the feeling of not being able to move. I was on my side, and I felt as if there were 2 large hands pressing down on me, keeping me pinned in my bed. I had to fight and kick my way out of it, and when I got control back, I was so frightened I ran to my car outside and slept the rest of the morning in the back seat of my car. Sleep paralysis is something that's happened to me a few times. I've been a sufferer since I don't know how long. And it's never fun when it happens, but this time was different. It literally felt like there was something that was actually touching me. And something about it was so unnerving. About a month had passed since that night, and I was getting closer to the day that I'd be moving away for good. My stress was at an all-time high, and the events of last month were far behind me and out of my mind. One night, my brother had his girlfriend over. This wasn't unusual, as she would often come over and spend the night. And that night, right before bed, we were having a bit of whiskey and chatting. We didn't drink enough to get drunk, that much is sure. But soon after, we retired to our bedrooms and went upstairs, my room being right next to my brother's. As they went into the master bedroom, my brother turned off the lights to the kitchen and went our separate ways. I crawled into bed, and as I laid down, I instantly fell into a deep sleep. Some time had passed, and I slowly awoke to a feeling. There was something moving on the bed. I was laying flat on my back, and I opened my eyes to see something that horrified me. It was the kind of thing that would have made me jump if not for the fact that my body was completely frozen stiff. I was completely paralyzed, only able to move my eyes. As I laid there motionless, I looked down at the length of my body to see what was moving. The covers of my bed were slowly being pulled off of my body, and off the end of the bed past my feet. My body couldn't move an inch, and I watched the covers be pulled by something that I couldn't see. The room was dark, but there was enough light to see anything. If a person were in the room with me, I would be able to see their silhouette. It was just then that I felt like there was someone standing in the corner of the room watching me, and they were aware of the fact that I had woken up. I stared back at it, and I forced myself to move as quickly as I could, not breaking line of sight with it. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't even make a sound, and all I could do was gently rock myself back and forth until I broke free of the paralysis. As soon as I had the ability to move, I jumped out of bed and turned my light on, and there was nothing in the corner. No one was there. My instinct was to run to my brother's room, but I still wasn't sure if what happened actually happened. I slowly made my way to the door, which, unfortunately, was the same corner where I felt the thing watching me. As I inched closer to the door, I heard something that actually brought me a little bit of relief. I could hear voices in the downstairs kitchen. It sounded like two people talking amongst themselves. I instantly assumed it was my brother and his girlfriend, so it made me brave enough to go to them. I opened my door quietly, and the first thing I could see was the light from the kitchen was on. I slowly crept out of my room, and as I did, I could clearly hear their voices now. It sounded like hushed laughter and people whispering to each other. I could even see the vague shadows of people moving from downstairs. I assumed that the two of them were having a late night snack or something, but nevertheless I was so happy that someone was awake and I wasn't alone. As I approached the stairs, my foot stepped into a part of the floor that made a loud creaking sound. As it happened, the voices from the kitchen suddenly stopped. Knowing that my brother and his girlfriend were suddenly aware of my presence, I made my way down the stairs a little faster to greet them, and as I rounded the stairs, to my horror, the kitchen was completely empty. There wasn't a person in sight, but the lights were on, and it was as if the people had just vanished. My brother's the kind of person who's very anal retentive. He turns off all the lights in his house. He's kind of a clean freak. Not turning off the lights is something that he would have never done. I watched him do it. There was no way he left the lights on last night. This entire display in front of me only scared me worse than I already was, but now I was worried about where my brother was. Maybe they had gone downstairs. Maybe I had just missed them. I was trying to rationalize. As I stood there staring into an empty kitchen, I felt as though I wanted to be nowhere near it. I felt checking the bedroom was the smartest thing to do. I went back up the stairs and past my room. The door was still open. I reached my brother's room and gently and quietly turned the handle. As I pushed the door inward, there, illuminated by the light from the kitchen, I could see my brother and his girlfriend. They were in bed fast asleep. As the reality of what was happening started to dawn on me, I realized that they had never left their beds, and I had no idea who that was speaking downstairs. It had been about 10 minutes since I had been awake. 10 minutes and I should have woken up by now. If this was a dream or a nightmare, it was still going on, and I was very much awake. Suddenly, there was a sound I heard just behind me. I turned to look, and the door to my bedroom slowly closed itself on me. There wasn't a single window open in the entire house, and it closed all the way. I didn't know what to do. It's silly now, but I thought it would have been rude to wake him despite how scared shitless I was at the time. I opted to instead pretend like everything was normal, and to ignore whatever was going on. I opened the door to my room, and instead of going back to bed, I went to the corner with my desk where my laptop was set up. I sat at my desk, powered on the computer, and began editing a video, pretending as if everything was perfectly fine. But as much as I tried to ignore it, somehow I knew there was something in my room watching me. And as I worked on my computer, it just sat there and watched me the entire time. I edited without sleeping until daybreak. As soon as the sun came up, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from the room, like the pressure from the atmosphere had ceased. I don't think I ever told my brother what happened, but maybe I should have. Maybe I wasn't the only one experiencing something. The end. Brew. Gotcha. Scared you. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed those. And it's a bit weird. It's a bit weird to kind of open up about those sorts of things when they happen to you. Because the craziest thing is, there is most likely a very scientific, explainable reason. In terms of ghosts, I'm actually still kind of a bit of a skeptic, but I'm a little bit open to some things. Based on those experiences, especially. I don't know how to explain those totally, but I think the combination of stress, being almost asleep, maybe dreaming while awake, there's plenty of things that could explain everything that had happened. But as far as I can tell, those really happened. I felt those. My brother felt those experiences. I felt those experiences. And still to this day, I can't firmly explain away what had happened. Until next year, I have 2 more for you, and they're both really good. So enjoy your Halloween. I'll see you guys next year. Take care. That's it. Goodbye.